Hey guys, it's Daniel, licensed therapist. Today we're going to be reacting to the throwdown of the century. Traditional men versus progressive men. Right versus left. Conservative versus liberals. The white supremacists versus the libtards. Okay, scratch that last one. And guess what, folks? The battleground is mental health. Your guy's specialty. So today we're going to judge who gets it right about depression and whether depressed men are weak, and we're gonna crown the winner. So today we're gonna look at the pitfall of each side. Are traditional men gonna go full Andrew Tate and say depression isn't real? Are the progressives gonna go full victim and say it's okay to be depressed? Well, let's find out.
All right, so the question is, are depressed men weak? I'm gonna let you guys see if you can come to a middle ground statement. You've got 8 minutes, go for it.
I'll let you go.
Okay, sure, yeah. I'm coming from the perspective that I don't think that depressed men are weak. I think that depression is something that needs to be taken very seriously, and I think that statements like depressed men are weak are exactly the kind of rhetoric that perpetuates the problem, that leads to people being stuck, including myself, experienced with depression, being stuck in this type of rut that you can't get out of. And the moment that I kind of acknowledged myself, what other people were telling me, but I was really like, oh my God, am I a weak man? Am I, somehow lacking in some sort of way? The moment I, put that aside and just was like, no, depression is a mental illness. Once I, got past that and, got the help that I needed, it was really the moment that I started to emerge from that. So I think that that type of statement is part of the problem and something that I want to push back
Okay,
against.
but what you would say is staying in a state of depression, I would consider that weak, right? Depression in and of itself isn't weak, but when you label yourself as a depressed person or you let that win you over, that is weakness.
So I would disagree because I think it's important to define problems as what they are. We don't solve cancer by not calling it cancer. We acknowledge that a problem exists, and how we respond to that is very important. But I don't think saying we shouldn't call people depressed because then they'll know that they're depressed or that they'll rot in that sort of state.
No, but I'm saying labeling yourself as a depressed person. Like saying that is part of my identity.
All right, so both have a very good point here. I would agree with the trad guy when he says you can't let depression define you and be stuck in it. And he's simply pointing out how acceptance and the incorporation of depression into one's identity can be detrimental. And you know what? I totally agree. On the other hand, the progressive guy is saying the same thing. And his experience is if you're able to identify it, you can get up and address the problem. Oftentimes people have mental health struggles and they don't know how to address it because they don't even know what it is. But once they get a diagnosis, it all of a sudden becomes clear and they can take care of it. They can start to address it. So that's a good thing about diagnosis, and it gives you a framework to understand what you're going through, and it also gives you a lot of different ways to address the problem. So on this one, guys, I think round one goes to the progressive guy.
If an athlete is injured in that second, I think he's weaker than he normally is. That doesn't mean he's weak overall, but in that second, yeah.
Is it weak to say that he's injured? Is it weak for him to claim, I am currently injured? I want to get better, but I'm currently injured.
No, but he's weaker.
For sure, people are definitely in a weaker headspace. Right. But I think, and maybe I'm putting these prescriptions onto this idea that aren't correct. So when I hear the claim men who are depressed are weak, I think of, oh, they're less manly. They need to get over it. They need to power through and grit. And it's I heard this from someone who was over there from your side. It's a weak mindset. It's a choice type of thing. And I reject that because it is a clinical diagnosis that people receive when they are depressed.
So what is a diagnosis? And diagnosis simply is just a group of symptoms. A diagnosis can change, and they often do change. So is depression a choice or a clinical diagnosis? Can you just get over it and power through? Well, people who are clinically depressed feel down most of the time, but they also have things like anhedonia, which means they lose pleasure or enjoyment in things that they used to enjoy. They have very low motivation, very little hope, and very little energy. And something like getting out of bed is such a huge chore for them. But how do you address something like that? How do you address somebody who can't get out of bed? And we have to be very careful with their thoughts, because the thought of accepting the diagnosis of depression could very well disempower them so that they actually don't get out of bed. Because we can do all the work in the world in therapy, but there comes a point where, frankly, there is an element of powering through something like getting out of bed. There's a point in which you really do have to have some kind of grit and willpower just to do it. So I don't know, guys, this one was pretty close, but I would say the traditional guy gets this round.
We all go through states of depression. I think no one here would argue that you're never going to be in a state of depression, right? Things happen where you do feel depressed.
There's depression and then there's people who describe themselves as being depressed. I think it's important to separate those
Yeah.
two because you can feel sad. Of course, everyone feels sad. Everyone has mood changes. Depression is clearly defined as persistent, like feeling bad regardless of the things that are going on in your life, even when things are going well.
Right, but I don't think the prompt was saying that depression makes you less of a man. Because
Okay.
I'm weaker, right?
Sure.
I'm in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
A squirrel could beat me in an arm wrestling match, right? I don't think anyone here would say I'm less of a man,
Sure.
right?
Oh, and I'm glad that those connotations are not present
Okay, cool,
in this
yeah.
conversation.
But my stance is you gotta keep on moving. Like you just have to, and you might have to take medication. I'm not against it. I'm
Sure.
pretty sure some people on my side are gonna be against taking medication. But
I'm glad they're not up here.
you have to do what you have to do. But I feel like society most of the times is okay. They say that it's okay to rot in it.
I really don't think that's largely the case. I think it definitely is in some subsets of the internet that you'll find. But I think most people, I think the way we treat mental illness is it's really hard for us to grapple with it because it's not visual. There's this idea that when you break your arm, everyone comes to sign your cast. But when you say you're depressed, they don't know what to do and run the other direction. And I think it's really important to break that type of stigma that mental illness is a real thing. I'm not sure. I don't want to speculate. I'm sure there are some people who don't really think it's a real thing. Oh, you just need to get over yourself. You need to work harder. Back in my day, we just said that we were, sad and we pushed through.
Well, we see it in TV. So we see it all the time, all over the place, where it's like, hey, I can't get up out of bed today. Oh, you know what? Mental health day. I don't disagree. But I think we are, as a society, letting that be a norm and letting that be okay, which I don't think it should be necessarily all the time. Because there's
agreed.
times where you have to get something done, and you can't just say like, hey, I'm gonna take a mental health day. Parents, I'm not a parent, but I'm pretty sure parents are here. They are depressed. They have to care for their kids.
Yes.
All right, you know what? What are we doing here? I feel like these guys are just agreeing. Sure, people get depressed, but you can't let that get a hold of you and run your life. There are times when you have to persevere through difficult things and situations, and what they're both alluding to is what we call grit. Grit is one of those newer psychological concepts that pretty much everyone knew since the beginning of time that it was a good thing, that we should have it. And so we're now starting to understand that it is vitally important in order to achieve anything significant. You have to have grit. So on this one, I would say they agree. Grit's important. It's a tie.
And I think you and I would both agree that like it's irresponsible if you're a parent or something of that nature to neglect your responsibilities because of mental illness. However, I do think it's very much the case that mental illness can be debilitating, can be crippling.
So weakness.
Yeah. Well, I guess
So
fine.
weak,
Okay, fine.
yeah.
Yeah, sure. Then you're defining weakness in such a way that it has no connotation behind it. If you want to say someone who is depressed is in a weaker mental state because they're not able to function as well, then I guess we agree. But that doesn't really get to any of the societal implications
Right,
where
and
there
I
might
think-
be some disagreement between you and me as
And
a
I think we've
traditional
done that, but I
progressive
think we
man.
could agree that depression is weakness then.
Okay, so I would agree with your literal statement. The problem is
Right.
there are a lot of connotations. When you say something's weak, it's like, oh, it should be looked down upon. That person is doing something that...
No, because I'm weak, so I don't want to be looked down upon.
I agree, and I'm very glad. But I think if someone were to like look at you, oh yeah, you're weak. That would be, but it wouldn't just be a literal factual statement about the nature of the world as it exists. It would be a normative judgment upon you as a person. In many cases, if someone calls disabled people weak, would you just be like, yeah, we are? Or would you be like, you're kind of an asshole, man?
It depends a lot on context. I
Agreed.
I agree with you, but
Sure.
well, then we would have to take everyone's opinion on it and stuff like
course.
that.
All right, so we have this ambiguous statement. Depression is weakness. And there's a pretty big difference on how each of these guys are taking it. And what they're doing is they're projecting their own individual thoughts, their own individual experiences and perspectives into that statement, which is why we have such a big difference here. The traditional guy says that the statement is true. And well, he's right. It is true. If you're depressed, you are weaker than you would be if you weren't. And well, the progressive guy is actually right as well. If someone were to come up to you and laughingly say to you that you're weak, well, that's just not nice and it wouldn't feel so good. So we have two very different and valid ways of looking at the same statement. So where do we go from here? Well, we go to the end. We look at the resulting behavior of each of these perspectives, and these two perspectives will produce something very different. And this is something that I do with my clients, and it's something that I feel like people rarely do. What is the product of your thoughts, your perspectives, your mindset, and what are the subsequent thoughts that come out of those thoughts and mindsets? Let's look at the progressive guy's perspective. Well, if you look at that statement as someone putting you down, you're going to feel victimized. You're going to feel sad. You're going to feel down. You're going to pity yourself, and you will go ahead and probably complain, or maybe you'll lash out at the person who said that to you, and maybe you'll say something mean to them or worse. And is that the behavior that you want to have? Let's look at the trad guy's perspective, and this is just me taking some liberties here, but if we take that statement as a matter of fact, we can then say to ourselves, well, if it is a weakness and I'm in a weaker state, if I get over it, I'll be stronger and I'll be in a stronger state. And this can cause someone to feel hope or optimism. It can even get somebody excited, and that can give you the fuel to get up and make some positive changes for yourself. When I was looking out to start my practice, I had a bunch of doubt and I was very self-conscious. I had my friend Don, who was one of my best friends. He would always say to me, go ahead, hurry up, start your practice. It's going to be great. I would respond with all of these doubts. And you know what he said to me? He said, be a man. That's right. He said, man up and be a man. And how did I take that? I was like, you know, Don, you're right. I do need to man up. And that really helped me take action to start my practice. So how are you going to take it? Are you going to make the choice to let it bring you down? Or are you going to use it as motivation? So the key actually isn't in the statement, it's in the perspective of the person receiving that statement. And you have to be very, very aware of the different products of the way that you perceive that statement. So for this final and last deciding round, the traditional guy delivers a knockout punch. Traditional guy takes it, ladies and gentlemen. But those are my thoughts. You think I'm wrong? I would love to hear it in the comments down there. And if you have something you want me to react to, please leave in the comments down there. Thanks for watching, you guys. I love you guys. See you next time.